You're one of the best field commanders I've got, but you don't know when to shut up, George.
The Battle of the Bulge.
I will be proud to lead you wonderful guys into battle anytime, anywhere.
The screen opens to silence. A single flag unfurls, filling the frame with red, white, and blue. Then, boots strike concrete. The echo builds like thunder.
I can't see the reason such fine young men get killed.
A lone voice growls through the noise. Men, all real Americans, love the sting of battle. That's not just a line. That's a declaration. The opening salvo of Patton, 1970, one of the most audacious war films ever made. But behind its 7 Oscars, its larger-than-life performance, and its thunderous tanks lie secrets, strange buried truths, and moments of sheer cinematic rebellion. So, before we charge forward, make sure you're subscribed, because today we're marching into the battlefield of film history, uncovering 20 hidden or weird facts you didn't know about Patton. Let's begin with fact number 20. 20. The movie that started with no studio logo. The film opens not with a logo, not with credits, but with an explosion of sound and command. The 20th Century Fox logo was removed on purpose. The filmmakers wanted no distraction, just you, the flag, and the voice of a man who was America's war machine. That decision broke every Hollywood rule, but it gave the film a heartbeat before the first word was spoken. The audience didn't watch Patton. They entered him. The war begins before the film even does. 19. The real revolvers of General Patton. Those ivory-handled revolvers George C. Scott wears weren't replicas. They were real. The production team borrowed Patton's actual Colt .45s from the West Point Museum. When Scott strode across the stage with those gleaming handles catching the light, the ghost of the real Patton walked with him. In that moment, fiction and fact fused together. He wasn't just playing a general, he was channeling one. 18. Soldiers saluted the screen. When Patton premiered at military bases, something extraordinary happened. As the giant flag filled the screen and that fierce voice barked "Ten Hut," soldiers in the audience stood and saluted, thinking it was an actual command. For a few seconds, cinema and reality collided. The audience didn't know whether they were in a theater or on the front lines. The film commanded attention, literally. 17. Francis Ford Coppola was fired before he became a legend. Before The Godfather, Coppola wrote Patton, but his first draft was too unconventional. The studio fired him. He wrote a version where Patton's flaws and arrogance were front and center. No hero worship, just raw humanity. The producers hated it. Then George C. Scott read the script. He told them flatly, "I'll only do the film if we use Coppola's version." Coppola was rehired. The result? A script that refused to glorify war, and instead revealed its insanity. The godfather of modern filmmaking almost lost his war before it began. 16. Filmed under a dictatorship. The film's massive battle scenes weren't shot in North Africa or Sicily. They were filmed in Franco's Spain. Spain's dictator provided troops, tanks, and open desert in exchange for exposure and cash. So every explosion you see, every field of soldiers charging, those are real Spanish army men under a fascist regime reenacting the Allies' march to freedom. A movie about liberty filmed under dictatorship, irony on a colossal scale. 15. The tanks named after Patton himself. There's a strange visual paradox hidden in plain sight. Many of the German tanks on screen weren't German at all. They were American M48 Patton tanks built years after the war and named in the general's honor. So on screen, Patton's forces are literally fighting Patton's. The man, the myth, the machine, locked in a cinematic civil war. History fighting itself in steel and smoke. 14. The infamous slapping incident. More real than you think. One of the film's most shocking scenes shows Patton slapping a shell-shocked soldier. Audiences gasped. It felt too brutal to be true. But it was. Patton really did it, twice. The movie combined both incidents into one moment. The Army hid the story during the war. The movie resurrected it, unflinchingly. Discipline and disgrace, united in one unforgettable slap. 13. historical errors hidden beneath perfection. For all its authenticity, Patton hides a few modern ghosts. Maps showing post-World War II borders, 1950s vehicles sneaking in a frame, tanks decades too new. But instead of breaking immersion, it adds a strange poetry. The film feels timeless, as if Patton's war could happen in any era. A few mistakes turned a period piece into a prophecy. 12. The voice that was never Patton's. George C. Scott's voice in the film, low, gravelly, booming, became the sound of Patton for generations. But those who knew the real general said his voice was surprisingly high-pitched, almost nasal.
Berlin! I'm gonna personally shoot that paper-hanging son of a bitch!
Scott gave him something better than accuracy. He gave him authority. The real man spoke like history's echo, but the actor gave him thunder. 11. The president who couldn't stop watching. Rumor has it Richard Nixon watched Patton again and again in the White House. Some claimed he studied the general's speeches, his defiance, his confidence, and carried that energy into his own political decisions. Whether myth or fact, the parallel is chilling. A president inspired by a movie general, and a film that blurred leadership with legend. 10. The opening speech that defined cinema. That giant flag monologue wasn't lifted from a single source. It's a patchwork of the real Patton's words, speeches, letters, fragments, edited and sharpened like a blade. George C. Scott insisted on performing it with absolute control. No cuts, no close-ups, one continuous command to camera. It became one of the most iconic openings in film history. One man, one flag, one voice, and 1,000 echoes. 9. George C. Scott refused his Oscar. When Patton swept the Academy Awards, 7 wins, including Best Picture and Best Actor, Scott made history again. He refused his Oscar. He called the ceremony a meat parade. He didn't want to compete with other actors, and he didn't want applause for war. The Academy still gave it to him. He simply didn't show up. In a night of gold statues, one man chose silence. 8. The real general versus. His Hollywood twin. Omar Bradley, played by Karl Malden, is shown as Patton's calm, loyal ally. In truth, Bradley couldn't stand him. He thought Patton was reckless, self-absorbed, dangerous. But the film needed balance. It needed an anchor. So history softened the tension into brotherhood. In Hollywood's version of war, even enemies can be friends. 7. Patton's belief in reincarnation. The real George S. Patton believed he'd lived many lives before this one. He told friends he'd fought as a Roman legionnaire, a crusader knight, even a Napoleonic soldier. The film hints at it, those haunting shots of ruins, that distant look in his eyes. To Patton, war wasn't just duty. It was destiny. He didn't believe he was fighting history. He believed he was history. 6. The mule controversy. In one shocking moment, Patton orders mules blocking a bridge to be shot. Audiences were horrified. Animal rights groups protested. But here's the truth. No animals were harmed. Clever editing and stage dummies created the illusion. Still, that single scene carried enough emotional weight to stir a real-world debate about cruelty and command. Even fake bullets can wound the conscience. 5. A television first. In 1972, Patton became one of the first major Hollywood epics to air on primetime television, less than 2 years after its theatrical release. It reached millions who'd never seen a film like it. Raw, philosophical, uncomfortably patriotic. That night, the sound of tanks and speeches filled American living rooms. The war came home, this time on television. 4. An army of extras. Those massive battlefield sequences weren't created with digital trickery. They were real. The Spanish army supplied over 7,000 soldiers as extras, along with hundreds of tanks and trucks. It gave Patton an authenticity few war films have ever matched. Every explosion had weight. Every march had rhythm. When you see an army on screen, it was one. 3. A script saved by stubbornness. At one point, studio executives demanded that Coppola's script be rewritten to make Patton more heroic. George C. Scott refused. No, he said, the film is about a man who loves war too much. that defiance saved the story's moral complexity. Patton isn't propaganda. It's an autopsy of glory. Sometimes, truth survives because one artist says no. 2. Fighting his own namesakes. The irony runs deep. The German tanks you see roaring across North Africa, they were Patton tanks, models named after the very man commanding the other side in the movie. So as the battles unfold, Patton's forces are literally firing on Patton's. It's as if the film itself acknowledges the circular madness of war. The general fights himself on both sides of the frame. 1. The legend that replaced the man. The real Patton was complex, brilliant, impulsive, sometimes cruel, often visionary. The film distilled him into something bigger, the myth of the American warrior. Over time, that version eclipsed reality. Ask most people today who Patton was, and they'll describe George C. Scott. History gave us a man. Cinema gave us a monument. And monuments, once built, never die. Bonus fact, the march never ends. In the film's haunting finale, Patton walks his dog through a quiet field. The war is over. The cheers are gone. The silence feels heavy. In voiceover, he recalls the ancient Roman triumphs, when conquering generals rode in glory while a slave whispered in their ear, "All glory is fleeting." It's a line that sums up the film, the man, and the myth. Because in the end, Patton's greatest battle wasn't with the Germans. It was with time and the way history remembers heroes. The war ended. The legend didn't. Half a century later, Patton still stands as one of cinema's great contradictions. Patriotic yet cynical, heroic yet tragic, brutal yet beautiful. It reminds us that glory is never clean and war is never simple. If you've stayed with us through this march across history, make sure to subscribe for more stories buried beneath the reels of Hollywood's greatest films. Because behind every frame lies a secret, and behind every hero, a haunting truth.